Hello, and welcome back to the 40% Better podcast, where we talk about all things leadership, specifically in the world of technology. And Jimmy has graciously accepted our invitation to come and have a chat with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, this is awesome. So, you work in AI, and I've got definitely some AI questions. But really, the kind of the starting point, the thing that I always ask guests at the beginning is, how did you get started in leadership? Like, what's the origin story?
Yeah, I mean, I actually started my career as a software engineer, right? But I got into leadership not by design, but kind of accidentally. So, um, I started as a software developer for about 1.5, 2 years, and I have a very odd opportunity to actually join GE as part of their leadership management program. At that time, I have no idea what the program is for, um, what the emphasis is, but it was GE back in time, right? It's one of the biggest company in the world. I'm like, this is a great opportunity. I'll give it a try, right? So what they did is they basically set up a boot camp kind of training program where what we call the mini MBA, almost like, and they send us all over the world on a 6 months rotation. So during the 2 year program, they send us to 4 or 5 different global locations, and I get to experience different type of leadership, different business units, different roles and functions. So it was very eye opening for me. It kind of defined what leadership means to me in different scenarios. And since I work with so many different great leaders in different business units, I really learn a lot, what great leadership actually looks like.
That is very cool because, and I'm kind of jealous because I didn't get to start that way. I would love to to have had a program like that when I started leading software teams. Um, you got the big win. Uh, I have to say, compared to myself and a lot of people that I've met that haven't had those programs, what were some of the key takeaways that you got from being in that program?
I would say having that business exposure, right? And tie the activity directly to business impact. And having access to higher level leaders, how they think about things, what matters the most to the business, and really connecting the dots, right? So one of the things that I think is the most beneficial to me is really to understand the work that I'm doing. How is it connecting to the business impact, right? How is it helping the business? How do you measure it, quantify it? Um, so that to me is probably the biggest gain for the 2 years within that program. And it gave me a very different points of view because when I was a software developer, all I care about is I work on something, I deliver something. So the result is measured by your activity, right? How busy you are, how many lines of code that you ship. But when you have the exposure in those kind of programs, you start to understand it's not really about what you do. It's more about the impact that you have, and how people value it.
Yeah, I really like that, and that's a great insight, by the way. Is the impact piece? Um, yeah, and there's actually a lot of psychological research around employee satisfaction at work that that being reminded of the impact that you're having, it helps a lot with employee satisfaction. That's one of the things that I've always, um, I guess I lucked into was I've always thought about the impact, and I've always talked with my teams about why we're building this. Like,
Mhm.
who's benefiting? Is it the sales team, the operations team, our clients. We've got somebody that, wants to use our service, but we don't have this feature. So when we build this, it, pulls in another $5 million in revenue, whatever it happens to be. I like that. Yeah. That's great that they did that very deliberately. And you got to learn that. That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I really learned a lot during those 2 years, um, and after that, I spent a few more years working with GE and GE Capital. Got more exposure to those kind of opportunities. Um, yeah, I just really miss those days. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for those of us that are lucky enough to work in environments where we look back and we're like, wow, that was really fun and exciting and challenging and so much that I learned. Yeah, it's hard to go back and replicate that. It's like that's what I want to build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. But you learn different things in different stage
Yeah.
of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you totally do. So what was the next progression? What was the next step forward?
So the next step is, 2008 hit, their GE as a business experienced some difficulty, and they actually moved their headquarters further into Connecticut. For me, I live in New York City, I live in Queens. I can't deal with 4 hours of commute every day, right? So that's why I switched. And my wife actually found me a job. She saw a job posting online with L'Oreal, and she's like, "Jimmy, do you have any idea who L'Oreal is? It's a kingdom. You have to be there." So, I ended up working with L'Oreal, and my wife got what she wanted. All the free products.
That may be a clue for HR people is that when you post jobs, uh, sorry, landscape guy,
Yeah, no
um,
worries.
is that the benefits to your spouse, if you put that in the job posting, it might get them to be a cheerleader for you. I think that's awesome.
Well, that's what they say. Happy wife, happy life, right?
Exactly. Yeah. 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 It's I've never thought about going to work for a company that did that kind of thing specifically so my partner could be happier, but now I've got to really think about that. That's a very good idea.
Well, I'm partially joking, but the work itself is genuinely interesting, right? Because
Mhm.
I was part of the founding member for L'Oreal's digital IT team to establish their e-commerce platform, and that platform is a global platform, still in use today. Multi-billion-dollar transaction revenue generated. It was a very exciting journey with them to build basically something from scratch and scale it at the global scale, right? At
Right.
one
Right.
point, we delivered more than 200 e-commerce websites in a single year. So you can imagine the
Wow.
scale of that platform, and how much work we deliver, or business impact that we deliver for the business.
Right. Right. Again, it's business impact. That's such a for me, that's always such a critical message is what's the business impact? Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely a meaning, right? So something that drives you forward. It's really a feedback loop. You
Right.
did
Yeah.
something, you see the result, and it give you the incentive, drive you forward to do something better.
Right. Right. Yeah. It feels good. It's brain chemistry.
It
Yeah.
is.
You get the dopamine, the serotonin rush, and you're like, oh, it's awesome. This is what I built. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. And so fast forward to now, you're
Mhm.
working with an AI company, right?
So I work at a company called ALM, where I serve as a CTO, CIO. Right. We actually just went through a private equity exit, and for the past 3 years, I would say we were working on a lot of cool AI initiative. It's interesting because we went through a journey of experimenting the cool stuff, but doesn't really generate a lot of real business value, to really focus on things that really move the needle, that
Right.
matters to the business, that actually influenced, at least partially, to a successful exit for us.
Without like divulging any secrets, um, from a philosophical perspective, what is it that you're in that context thinking of as bringing business value?
So you basically have to, you know, we started around 3 years ago when the hype of a large language model, generative AI, is the highest, right? Um, Back then, you have the board asking, "What are you doing in AI? Right? How can we make money from it? How do we use AI to help with the PE exit goal that we have?" Um, and back then, a lot of thinking is is never short. We're never short of ideas. We have ideas from our finance team, and our engineering team is everywhere, right? People have great ideas, but what matters is, do you have a system to select the ideas, right? To fund those ideas that move the needle, and monitor it, and turn that into a narrative that's, even if some ideas doesn't turn into immediate value or revenue, but it's the right thing to do. It has great future impact. You want to keep investing it. So what we did is we categorized the value. We try to understand it first, right? We categorize into three different categories. Number one is the most obvious one. That is the one that everybody talk about, but in my opinion is the most dangerous one, is productivity. So everyone use AI tools. I'm sure you use it. I use it. It's beneficial. We see productivity gains. The trap is, how do you roll it out? How do you evaluate it at the enterprise level, right? So it's easy to say that a developer, may save 2 hours every day by using AI. Um, but how would you measure the impact? Are they delivering more code? Um, do you see an elevated revenue? Do you see cost savings? Right. So when you try to answer those questions and tie it back to the productivity gain, a lot of times, most of the company, they don't see a huge impact, right? They don't see it reflected in the numbers. Some call it productivity leakage, but as I think is a lot of it is related to, do you have a system? Do you have the structural changes to capture those savings? The savings are there, but if you're not ready or set up to capture those savings, it goes somewhere else. It goes into coffee chat. It goes into learning new things, right? It's something that, unless you already have a baseline that you can track all of those things, which is extremely difficult to do, is probably the hardest category to quantify the impact. So that's number one. Number two is, for a product and services company, I think the most immediate benefit is actually applying AI into your core product. Not so much in the sense of, you know, adding a chatbot here or there. A lot of times this is a worse idea that you can do to your customers. The majority of the time, this doesn't work very well. So you should really look at, where the friction is and how AI can help to reduce the friction, can automate, reduce some effort, and try to measure it, right? And really look at if this is something that your customer will be willing to pay for. Can you increase your average selling price, your ASP? Can you drive down cost, right? Does it mean a better user experience for your customer? Somehow you have to connect with your commercial team to capture that value. And that, to most company, is how you turn AI investment into an ROI, how you make money out of it. And the third category I would say is new product and services and, strategic directions. For us, that turned out to be a major bet, and we made it. We made the right bet, and it turned out to be a very substantial revenue stream added to our, portfolio. But for a lot of companies, that's something that you have to evaluate very carefully. It may not be an immediate, ROI within a year, but down the line, 2 to 3 years, you want to paint the picture. You want to be able to tell the story. Okay, this has longer term impact and it's
Right.
worth the investment. So really visit the three category, how we look at, AI value. Um, and some people call it the AI ambition. What do you want the AI to achieve, right? And deliver for your organization. Once you understand that, you can talk about the rest. How do we implement it? How do we monitor it? Those kind of things.
I think that's a really good explanation. I really like the way you kind of categorize out the potential benefits. Um, Employee productivity. Um, I'm used to thinking of productivity in terms of agile story points, because it's an easy number that I can look at, week over week, sprint over sprint,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. and and I think, like the softer metrics are like churn in the company, right? Like I figure if our churn is close to zero, we're doing something right. People enjoy working here and nobody wants to leave, then somehow we've got some balance of things going on that's working pretty well.
Mhm.
um, with the stuff that you're doing with AI, like what are you seeing internally with your people? And how did you guys measure the productivity gains?
Yeah. Productivity is an interesting topic, right? So I talked to a few CFOs and CEOs, and what they told me is, Jimmy, I can measure every other function's productivity, how effective they are, but I'm struggling to measure engineering developers. And then I think there's a couple of reasons for that, right? So when you talk about productivity, you're essentially talk about, I think, 2 to 3 different things. Number one is you're talking about the efficiency where you're measuring the activity. So things like, the pull request size, um, the merge frequency, coding time, waiting time, cycle time, you're essentially measuring the effectiveness of the activity. But then there's another side of a story, which is how effective your activity is tying to the business results, right? And that you use a different set of measurement,
Hmm.
and usually at the team level, not at the individual developer level. And and I think the combination of those two things together, and plus what you mentioned, the retention, right, and the developer experience. Do people want to stay with you? Do they feel fulfilled, right, by doing this job? Um, all of those play a very important part of the overall developer productivity, developer experience. And coming back to your question about how AI is changing it, I look at AI as a amplifier for people who know how to use it. Um, which means if you have a high AI fluency, you know what's right, what's wrong, what's good, right? And a lot of people call it taste, right? You'll be more effective in orchestrating the work, and you'll be 10 times more productive and generating more results. But coming back to the effectiveness, but if you what you're producing cannot tie to the business result, and you're not asking the
Mm,
right question. You're not doing the right thing. And that's a problem. It doesn't matter how effective, how productive you can churn out code if you're, producing irrelevant results, right?
right.
So I think
Mm,
really it coming down to having the ability to ask the right question, tie it to the business result, business impact, and working with your stakeholders, like your product managers, your sales team, commercial team, finance team, to validate and to validate if you're working on the right thing, asking the right question. I think that to me is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I think is that the productivity is a hard thing to explain, but it's all coming back to the business impact.
right. Okay. And that totally makes sense. Um, I think I think because most of my career has been in smaller companies, um, it's it's very easy to get to the business impact when you're in a smaller organization because everything that we're doing is, oh, I've got a customer that wants this feature, right? And or we need to keep up with the Joneses, and so we haven't focused on this area, and now we need to because we're at a competitive disadvantage, and so we need to build this thing, right? Or, oh, we see this thing we can advance ahead. Um, it's interesting because I think, and especially because I've been at so many startups, the the business impact is like the first thing that I think about, and I've never really been in a context that I can think of where I wasn't thinking about business impact because I wanted to get paid. Like the company has to keep going, right? Um, so that's interesting. Um, Wh because I always think about systems, do you guys have a system for helping the engineers understand the impact of the work they're doing?
Yes. Uh, it's more related to how we structure the team. So what we call it the fusion team. So my belief is, if you look at from the start of the business requirement, let's say from a sales team, commercial team, whoever the business stakeholder is, right? Then the product managers then gather the requirement and work with the designers, developers, um, to do some of the proof of concept, get validation from the business customer, and then proceed with the engineering process. So it's a feedback loop. Um, that usually takes a couple months, right? But what I'm thinking about is how can you, but in today's day and age, especially with the help of AI, that feedback loop need to accelerate. So what happens right now is the engineering part with the use of AI tooling, you can produce code or, design, high level design, interactive design very, very quickly within a couple of hours or days. The right now, what's being stuck is the ability to validate those hypotheses, those designs, to see how the customers is reacting to it. That part of the feedback loop is still the same. It hasn't evolved yet, right?
Mm.
And if you think about it, it's it usually a lot of organization they're structured by function, right? And those feedback loops is not happening at the execution layer. A lot of time it goes up to the top, right, during management meeting, and then get trickled down to the execution layer. And you can imagine how slow it can be,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Well, what we did is we actually formed a couple of cross-functional pods that has the sales team, the finance team, product managers, developers, designer together. So that feedback loop happens on a daily or weekly basis.
Mhm.
So immediately, whenever the engineering produce something, the sales team can go back to their customer, ask for feedback. So what we've seen is a very much accelerated, um, I would say, flywheel, if you will,
Right.
and that to us is the biggest change. And coming back to the business impact portion of the question, when developers see immediate feedback on the work they produce, they feel very motivated. They can see the business impact and they get more involved. And the biggest change is we're seeing developers stepping up, right? They're behaving not only as a developer, they're behaving like an architect, like a mini CTO. They understand the business requirement. They're debating, hey, is this the right way of doing it? Versus before is like, okay, now you asked me to do it, and I'll do it. Whether it's the right thing or the right way of doing it, yeah, I don't know. I don't care, right? But
Mm.
yeah, that change has been huge, right?
Yeah.
And when you have multiple pods throughout your product engineering organization, the speed of how things are moving doubles, triples.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that approach. Yeah, that open communication and and pulling in other stakeholders and not worrying about chain of command anymore. Um, I I've done that at multiple companies. Um, and actually I started doing it at the second startup that I was at because the founder of the company, I kept waiting for him. Like I would ask him for stuff from other orgs because I didn't know any better. I was like, oh, I got to follow chain of command, whatever. And one day he was like, why don't you just go talk to them directly? And I was like, I can do that. Like, you won't be upset. And he was like, no, really, like you go do it and take me out of the loop because I feel like I'm friction in the conversation. And I was like, oh, oh, okay. and, and, uh, and yeah, and everything got much faster because, and also I learned things and got insights that allowed allowed us to go, wait a minute, marketing has a problem, we can fix it for them,
Mhm.
or sales, or like that wouldn't have necessarily caught in his filters, and that he wouldn't have brought that knowledge back to us if we'd let him do it. Um, but yeah, I love that model. I'm a huge fan of internal industrial espionage.
Well,
Which
I actually see more and more company adopting that model, even the bigger ones, right?
yeah.
I can't remember who asked me that question, but the way I look at it, I think, especially with AI's influence, um, the structure of your team, the workflow is changing very fast, right? Which also means the demand or the requirement for leadership will further evolve. So
Mhm.
if you think about, our the way that we grow our career, we kind of there's a ladder that you have to climb, right? So you start by individual contributor, you get into management, become manager, senior manager, director, VP. Your responsibility grows because of the complexity and primarily reflects in the budget, responsibility that you have, the number of people that you manage. So that's how the complexity grows. But if you think about in the next few years, it's not going to grow linearly from a headcount budget standpoint because of AI as an amplifier. So it will have interesting impact on how leadership evolve in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, in retrospect, the whole, from the mid 90s till now, the whole internet technology thing has kind of had these like leapfrog moments where, it was progressing along and then there was this like vertical jump of like, uh AWS and cloud computing totally
Mhm.
changed a whole bunch of games, right? And in ways that when it when it first came out, because I was a startup and we were super early adopters of AWS. Um, it, it was oh, what I can have a new server right now. you know,
Yeah.
we can I can just add another server into the cluster and and it doesn't cost me thousands of dollars to get the box and put it in a cage. And
Oh,
now
yeah.
I've got to get a switch, like all the all the stuff I'd worried about before then.
Mhm.
Now I'm like, oh, and I'm only paying for the amount of time I'm like, it just was a whole different ball game. Completely changed how we thought about architecture,
It
and so now it's like, I feel like we're at an inflection like that with AI that that we couldn't see when AWS launched what it would look like in 10 years. Like somebody at Amazon may have actually had that figured out in their, seeing the future. But as somebody who was using it, like I just didn't, I had no way to look and consider how it would go, and or what opportunities it would let people take on, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting because the way I look at it, um, I think there might be some way that you can. I'm not saying that you can predict it, but you can manage it and adapt to it quicker than most.
Hmm.
So what I mean by that is if you look at what we do on a daily basis, right? So at the core of it, you have different functions, different roles within those functions. And what those roles are is essentially the knowledge plus the workflow, right? So if I'm a financial analyst, there are certain things that I do, there are certain things that I know, and I follow certain workflow for my job. And within each of the workflow, there are different tasks, right? So if you drill down from the role to the workflow to the task, you can sort of look at how AI will change from the task level and how is it changing your workflow and eventually how is it impacting your roles. So this is why I'm saying that within the next couple of years, there's going to be a reshuffle going on because your task is changing, which means your workflow is evolving and your role will be changed.
Right.
And people who can analyze it, who can understand how AI is changing their tasks, their workflow, they'll be better prepared to adapt to those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I like that. I think I think, if we look back through history, there's, what are the inflection points where we've had big shifts in how people do things. And, in the moment as things were evolving, you don't necessarily notice it. Like everything we do documentation today is digital,
Mm.
like I, I can't tell you the last time I actually had to sign a real piece of paper for anything that I was doing legally, right? It's always DocuSign or, some equivalent, right? It's all
Right.
digital. Um, and, and I take that for granted, even though I know intellectually 25 years ago, it was reams of paper I had to go through and sign, you know? Um, and so that's, there's this evolution. AI is going to be another set of evolutions. How do you get your people comfortable with this volatility?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important thing when it comes to AI, especially for those people who have high AI fluency, high agency, you don't have to worry about them. They'll figure
Mhm.
it out. They'll understand it. AI is such a experiential technology that you have to try it. You have to do it to understand the impact.
Right.
Analogy I always use is like riding bicycle, right?
Yeah.
Remember when you ride bicycle, no matter how much tutorial video you watch, you have to get on that bicycle, learn for yourself. And after a few hours, you get that balance. That's the moment it click in your mind.
Right.
AI is very much the same thing. You have to do it, right? And for the these people is what I call the AI frontier people. They'll just figure it out. You don't have to worry about them. They'll make the shift just fine. The type of people that I'm worried about are the people that they're they still have a good portion of their workflow not digitized. The institutional knowledge still exists in their head. Um, they learn a little bit slower, right? So they're not adapting to the tool sets as much. So uncertainty creates fear,
Hmm.
and fear is the biggest enemy, right? So
Yep.
to basically, help your organization, your team to build up that psychological safety when it comes to AI that is not coming for your job. And how can you keep up with it? How do you evolve your workflow, your role, to be competitive? I think that's the real challenge. And number one, you have to do it through training, and you have to have conversations with your team. And a very helpful way that we did it is that you have a few AI champion who's those AI frontier people who's willing to share their experience and help people to figure out, okay, how is AI helpful, and how can we apply AI to our daily workflow? How is it changing it, right? So those kind of things definitely help. And at the leadership level, you really want to make a commitment um, on the tooling investment, training investment, and helping people to think a little bit differently. It's not about learning the tool. It's about relook at what you do, your workflow, your tasks, and reimagine it.
Right. Yeah, and that's going to be a really interesting challenge. You're talking about psychological safety and and helping people get past their fear of change. Um, yeah, that'll be there's I notice that there are people that I've worked with that are super comfortable with change. And then there's people that are not so comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, and 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 I think that's gonna be a very interesting, it's the God, what's it called? Uh, Crossing the chasm, the
I
whole
see.
remember? There's that whole bell curve, right? You got the super
Right.
early adopters, and then you've got the majority, and then you've got the laggards, right? People who still don't have cell phones, they just have a landline in their home,
Yeah.
kind of those people. And so, with AI and with anything, it's kind of like, how's that gonna play out? Um,
Yeah. So there's a there's a how do I describe it? There's an inflection point. The inflection point hasn't got here yet. So what I mean by that is if you imagine there's two axles, right? So one is let's say the vertical one is the AI readiness, the technology readiness. And the horizontal one is the people readiness or the organizational cultural readiness, if you will. Both of them have to mature at a point that both of them have to work for the entire AI revolution to work. Where
right,
we are, I feel like the first 3 years after Gen AI has emerged is the technology is catching up. There's a tremendous amount of friction to adopt it, meaning that you need to learn prompt engineering. You need to feed all those context into the model in order to produce decent result. And still, the model hallucinate, right? It produce sometimes garbage result that you have to know what's wrong, what's right, right?
Right.
So it give
Yeah.
people a feeling that this is not trustworthy. I don't know if I can trust it. So, and that's the biggest barrier for adoption. And on the people side, once you reduce those friction, make it invisible, make it really a low cost to adopt, and that's where the inflection point is. And once you get there, I think the adoption curve will just accelerate exponentially. So, and we're not so far away from it. Probably within the next, I would say, a year or two.
Oh, that's a very short timeline. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting pattern to look at and be like, "Okay, where are we in the curve and the adoption?" And, um, it's what's interesting to me, like, my older son who's in college, I was talking to him about AI, uh, and he doesn't use it. He is number 1, because his professors have said they don't want students using AI. But the other thing is he doesn't feel as emotionally satisfied when he creates, he has to write a paper on something.
Mhm.
Um, he doesn't feel as emotionally satisfied when because he's experimented with AI, right? And he's like, I don't feel as good about the work when I use AI to help me as I do when I do it all myself, which I was really, uh, that wasn't the what I was expecting to begin with, right? So I was like, "What about the time savings?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't care about the time savings as much as I do how I," back to brain chemistry, right? How he feels about having done the work. Um, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Are we gonna have more of that? Are we gonna have, it's like they're gonna be this group of people that like that's how they think about it." Um, it's a different perspective, you know?
It is that I think everyone will have a different perspective. Each individual's situation is different. So I think again, coming back to your understanding of how to apply AI, right? So,
Right.
what are the most important for me, for example, what's the most important thing that I do? I got paid to make quality important decisions as a CIO, CTO, right? And does it help me to spend 2 hours trying to, make a pixel perfect PowerPoint? Not so much, right? So to me, that's a waste of time. So I choose to apply AI to help me um, to generate some artifact that I can use.
Mhm.
For me, that's a good use of my time um, to to basically spend my time on thinking. AI doesn't replace your thinking, but
Right.
all those commodity work can be replaced by AI. Really, so this is why it's different for every single person. You know, you know your workflow, you know your value the most. Whatever to me, whatever adds to my value and amplify my value, that's where I'm gonna use AI for. But AI does not replace my judgment, does not replace my critical thinking, because that's the part I got paid for.
Right. Right. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. The idea that AI doesn't replace your critical thinking is such a I it's a very empowering perspective to have, and, that may be the title of this episode. Because I think that's one of the fears people have is, will AI replace my critical thinking, and how do I trust it, right? Because if it hallucinates and delegated my critical thinking to this thing and then it hallucinates, what's the consequence? You know?
Yeah. I think we're at the point that AI is so powerful. It actually 95% of the time is actually producing very good result. But having the ability to tell what's right, what's wrong, and in a lot of cases, it's not as simple as black and white, right or wrong. It's that subtle difference that really highlight your value as a human
Right.
being, right? That the machine cannot get it. And that's your core value proposition as a human being in the age
Right.
of AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's cool. This has been awesome. I'm aware of the time and going like, okay, I've almost run out. And I don't want to cause a problem. So this has been amazing. Thank you. I might have to have you come back on and talk about AI more because I
Yeah,
really,
I'd love to.
yeah, I like the way that you frame it. Um, it, it's totally selfishly. It's a way that resonates with me very well, and hopefully the rest of the audience. That would be awesome.